Hi everybody, welcome back to the second and hopefully final part of the Airfix 1/48 scale Bulldog build. This is the brand new tool from Airfix, released just in June I think it was. And in the first episode I managed to get the fuselage together and did all the cockpit detailing, got the horizontal stabilizers on and did the two wings. These are just two simple upper and lower parts for both upper and lower wings, and I've given these a coat, an overall coat of Tamiya gloss aluminium. That's to replicate the fabric dope on the wings mainly and on the rear part of the fuselage. This is a lacquer paint, goes on really nice, and we've got a decent base there with it being a gloss aluminium for the decals on the rear of the fuselage, particularly the roundels and so on. So we'll be doing that a bit later on, but I need to first of all mask off the forward part of the fuselage because I'll be doing that in a polished aluminium colour, and I'm going to be using these AK Extreme metal paints with a polished aluminium, and I'm going to be using AK's black base, which is this one. This is the first time I've tried these AK Extreme metal paints, and I've heard various reviews of them. Some people find them difficult to apply, but some have had really good results with them, so let's hope I can get a decent result on the Bulldog. So what I'm going to do is mask off the forward fuselage, and then we'll get a coat of the black base on the forward cowlings. These ready cut circle masks are very useful, and I've just used a couple of the 1mm ones just to give me the radius here on this mask. It would be quite difficult to cut that, but these ready cut masks really do a good job. I've had these for quite a while. They come in I think 3 or 4 different sizes, going right up to, the biggest one, 7.6mm in 0.2mm increment. So these come in quite handy. I use these quite a bit for masking. Okay, so that's all nicely sealed up, ready to go. So I'll just plug the cockpit up and get the black base on. Okay, the black has gone on really nice and smoothly without too much paint application. So that's pretty impressive. I'll leave that to dry now for at least 24 hours, probably a day and a bit. Before I apply the polished aluminium, I want to make sure the black is fully cured before I apply the polished aluminium over the top. But so far so good. Hopefully we'll get a decent result with the top coat. Okay, the polished aluminium appears to have gone on pretty good really. It might be a little bit bright, but I think once we've got the rest of the airframe done and it's balanced against the duller aluminium that I've painted the rest of the airframe, should be alright. At least we've got that big contrast between the two shades of aluminium. So I want to make sure that that's absolutely dry before I do any more work on it. I've got to mask it off to paint a green kind of an anti-reflective section right the way across the top of the fuselage. So it's going to need masking off, so I want to make sure that this paint here is absolutely hardened off before I put any masking tape on it. Otherwise I'm a bit worried that I'll ruin the finish on that. So I'll just take this masking off for now and leave it to dry for a couple of days. Okay, so I've been back in and masked off this rear section of the metalwork, if you like, as opposed to the fabric areas of the aircraft. And I've just overcoated that with some plain aluminium from the AK range, as opposed to the polished aluminium of this forward section. And what that's done is made the distinction between what was plain doped fabric at the back, the polished aluminium sections here at the front, and just plain aluminium behind the cockpit. So we've got that distinction of the three shades now on that paintwork. Now, I left the polished aluminium for 3 days to dry, and it took the masking tape without any problem. But just to be cautious, I'm going to do the same again. I don't want the paint to lift when I take the masking tape off. I'm just using a bit of microset here to get the decal down. Push all the air out and try to do that before the adhesive starts to grab. Just gives you a chance to get the decal in absolutely the correct place before the adhesive dries. And that's the air out, and it's correctly positioned, so I'm going to leave that to set up for a while. Probably give it 5 minutes just to dry a little bit, and it'll start to settle down a bit. And then we'll probably need a little bit of microsol as well, just to get the decal to settle down over a little panel here at the back. Okay, so that's more or less set. So I just want to apply a little bit of microsol. I'm just going to do it over the area of the panel that I want to get the decal to settle down over. There's no need to do the rest, it's settled pretty well. Just giving the decal a helping hand over these ribs, which are for the bomb rack. Okay, they've gone on okay. So I'll do the top wing now. Now here I want to start with the squadron marking here, which is this double zigzag pattern. And that's because I don't want to set the roundel on one side or both roundels and then try and fit this in. It's a pretty precise fit between the end of the squadron marking and the upper wing roundel. So we'll get this one on first, get it centered, and then the roundels should follow. Be careful with these, I've broken the decal just dragging it off the sheet, but I think we'll be alright with that. So just gently start to bring it into position, and I'm looking for the centre line of the wing, to line the apex of this decal up. Not too many stencils on this aircraft, but these are quite interesting. These are the older style, which instructed the ground crew that the various components had to be bonded, electrically bonded. All the paint now has been on for just over a week, so I'm happy to apply the decals over the top of it. And one thing that I'm going to avoid with these is using any microsol. They're made by Cartograph, the decals, so you don't really need it if you're careful with them and patient with them. I'm just a bit concerned about the sol affecting the metallic paint. So this is the basic engine that I assembled earlier, and I'm going to prepare the cylinders now, although I can't fit them to the engine, otherwise it won't fit into the front of the fuselage. So Airfix warn you to install the engine first and then attach the cylinders afterwards, and I'll show you the reason for that when we come to do it. But I can prepare the cylinders, and there are 3 different types which are located in different positions around the engine. So we just need to keep a record of which cylinders are which. This is just some double-sided tape. And just mark those up with the assembly number. That's how they're distinguished in the Airfix instructions. So I'll just repeat that with the other cylinders which are different to these. So to paint the engine, I'm going to be using our AK colours again, the same that I used on the forward part of the fuselage. But in this case, I'll be using the steel for the engine. So these are the engine parts based with black, the gloss black that we used before. So I'll leave these to dry overnight. They are actually very quick drying, but I've got other things to do with the build, so I can afford to leave these to one side for 24 hours or so, and that'll make sure they're absolutely cured, the paint ready for the overlying steel colour. That's the last major piece of masking on the model for this top deck of the fuselage in this green. I used Tamiya NATO green for that. And just another little trick that I used, if you've not seen it before, is just to use post-it notes like this, just to increase the border of the masking so you don't get any overspray. But the other thing is, I'll also use a piece of post-it note just to cover the decal up, in this case the fuselage roundel, so that the masking tape doesn't contact it directly. Even though these are pretty good decals and they've gone down really well, stuck hard, there's still always that danger of just tearing them as you take the masking tape off. But that's all done, ready for assembly. So the first job, I suppose, is to get the lower wing on. These little struts that I'm fitting here, they go between the wing and the fuselage down at the bottom. Now I've test fitted these to make sure that they're going to go in neatly. So it's just a case of trimming off the bottom section here until it plugs in to the wing top. because you don't want to get to this point and find that it's not going in properly. These are actually a little bit of a Bristol trademark. If you think of a Bristol fighter where the lower wing was suspended below the fuselage on little struts like this. So it just seems to be a fairly common design feature of the manufacturer. These are generators of some sort. They've got a little propeller to go on the front. These are a pair of machine gun barrels go onto the side. The breeches went in when I did the cockpit. One little refinement you can make with these is just to drill the barrel ends out, which I've done. This is the ring sight, and I've replaced the fairly clunky Airfix moulding, plastic moulding of the ring with a piece of photo etch, and I never throw any of my photo etch sheets away, and this particular ring is from a 1/200 scale hood. It's actually one of the winding wheels for one of the guns. So nothing's ever wasted. If you hang on to it long enough, you'll find some use for it. You have to be so careful at this stage, because these parts, when you put the glue on them, if you slip, you're going to mar the finish. Now the tricky part of any biplane build, which is attaching the top wing. Now you'll notice that I haven't fitted the interplane struts because I'm just going to drop those in afterwards. I want to get the wing aligned on the cabane struts here, and then, as I said, I'll just spring the main struts into position, hopefully. Okay, so the top wing's fitted after quite a struggle, I have to admit. It's quite a complicated arrangement, particularly in the centre of the wing here. The main learning point for me is to make absolutely sure that the sockets that the struts are going to go into properly cleared out, and you've test fitted each of the struts into that socket to make sure that it's just going to drop in. And if you don't do that, what you might end up with is the strut might not go to the full depth, and that'll start to cause alignment problems. And it might be that if you get one that's not full depth over here, you might not get it to reach at all on the other side of the wing. So that test fitting is absolutely crucial. I think the other thing is, if I built another of these, I might plug up the sockets with some latex so that it didn't get any paint build up in it. And that just might ease the build when you come to put the wing on. Anyway, it's on now, which I'm glad about, and the next job is to do the undercarriage. Fit the legs, which are these. Now I've assembled these dry on the model and just glued the axle into position, and then just removed it, the whole assembly, for painting. So that's now ready to go on. The tail skid. All the engine components, which have had a coat of AK steel, I'm going to give them a wash over now with this, which is an AK product as well. This is just a general wash for engines. It's time to fit the engine now. Get it orientated correctly. And as I said earlier on in the video, the cylinders are not fitted, and that's because it won't be possible to get the engine in with the cylinders in place, because they wouldn't go through these little gaps here. So once that's in place, we can now get the cylinders, the individual cylinders, fitted. Now, I always had a worry about these, that they were going to be too tight to fit, and again it's the case. You've got to be really careful with this kit, that the pins and sockets for the pins all the way through the build have been really tight, and these are no exception. So I'm going to have to drill them out to make the fit a little bit smoother. So, having tried a couple of times, I've drilled these out and they're still not sliding in properly. And the problem is that you're putting a lot of force onto the airframe, and obviously it's very delicate. So I'm going to have to come up with a different method. And I think what I'm going to do is cut off the pins on the engine, at least quite a long way down. Just leave the stub down at the bottom. So try again. And that goes in without any pressure at all, and I'm not putting any glue on those. Once they're located correctly with the exhaust connected at the back, the cylinder's not going to go anywhere. So that's a much better and safer way of putting these together. Now we have our two special cylinders, if you like. These are designed to fit just in one location, so it's important to get them in the right place. So all safely in. I think that's one area of the kit that's a little bit over-engineered, really, because the pegs on the engine block are square, and I guess that's to make sure that the cylinders are aligned correctly. But actually, they're not going to go in any other way than facing in the correct direction. So that square pin just makes the assembly just that little bit tighter and harder, and you do risk damaging the model by putting any force on it at all. I've just given the wheels a coat of flat varnish. I had glossed them for the decals that I've just applied earlier on. I have just put ever such a slight flat on the tyre. It's not that there's a great deal of weight trying to be represented here. It's just that I think these aircraft look a little bit odd if the wheels are perfectly round and the aircraft appears to be standing on tiptoe. So that just takes a little bit of that edge off. Just must remember now to get them level with the ground. So I'll set that down on the bench with the flats and leave the wheels to dry. Okay, it's crunch time on any biplane build, starting the rigging. And I've already done the port bay, wing bay here, and in between the cabane struts, and the cross braces on the outer wing struts as well. So that's one side more or less finished. I've got the aileron control wires to put in, which I'll use a smaller gauge. This is 0.33mm nickel silver rod. So that scales out something like 16mm in actual width. And it looks about right in 1/48 scale. The advantage of using nickel silver rod is it's extremely stiff, so it maintains a straight line. It doesn't sag, and it's also obviously bright, a silver colour, as was the actual rigging. So all in all, it does a reasonable job, I think. The problem with it is that you've got to cut it individually to length. And there's no shortcut really for that. You've just got to do each one at a time and measure and cut and measure again until you get the right distance between the rigging points. So I'll do the other side. This is the rod that I'm using. It's from Albion Alloys, 0.33 as I said. I'll also use this, which is 0.1mm nickel silver rod, for the control cables, so the ailerons and the rudder, which is a lot thinner, but we'll do that later. Let's get the main rigging sorted out. So it's going to be very difficult to capture this on camera. You need to be able to maneuver the airframe around, and I'm not going to be able to do that whilst trying to get it on camera. So we'll do the double wires at the front of the wing. And I'm just going to cut the wire roughly to size. It's slightly over, and it's then just a case of continually test fitting until you get the right length. And then I've used some gel type CA and just fix one end into its location on the lower wing. And then just secure at the top end. Just need tiny amounts of CA for this, and as I said, I'm using a gel type. So unless you put any sort of stress on the wire, because it's so stiff, it's going to lie in a perfectly straight line, which is what you want. Now, bearing in mind that the double wires which run from here to here have a single wire passing in between them from here up to the cabane strut. So it's just easier to fit this one next and then overlay it with the second of the double wires. That's the front bay done. Just got to repeat that now on the back. These are the aileron control wires in the 0.1mm rod, so they're a lot finer. Okay, so that's the rigging all finished, thank goodness. Looks nice with the nickel silver rod. And I've just got one or two bits and pieces of the final detail parts to do now, so I'll just work our way around the model until they're done, and then the last job, just fit the aerial wires. You can see I've left the fin and rudder off until this stage. The connection between the fin and the rudder is very fragile, and I wanted to make sure that it lined up correctly before fitting it. That's all the detail parts fitted. I've done one or two touch-ups here and there on the airframe, and I'll get the aerial wire fitted now. I'm just going to use this. This is Ushi van der Rosten fine rigging thread. It's an elastic material. Just need a tiny amount of CA on the mast. So when you've got a situation like this where you're joining two aerial wires together at right angles like that, the trick is not to over tension this new piece, because if you do, it will pull this long cable or wire out of shape. You'll get an angle on it and you want it to be square. So you're looking for just enough tension to get this straight without pulling the other aerial out of shape. And the last job is to fit the propeller. That's all done, and it's turned out nice. It's a really nice effort from Airfix. The difficulty, apart from the usual difficulties of building a biplane model, is that the tolerances, as I've mentioned in the video, the tolerances on all the parts that plug in are very tight. So you've got to test fit them, drill the holes out to a slightly larger size than Airfix give you, and make sure that the parts are going to fit without forcing any of the structure, because if you do, it's just far too delicate to stand it. That's particularly true for the strut sockets, which I mentioned. They're very tight, and any failure to make sure that they're in the correct position when they're in place means that it just throws the whole geometry of the aircraft out. So apart from that, the fit is good and the model certainly looks the part when it's finished. So I'll get some photographs in close-up for the end of the video. Hope you've enjoyed it. I hope if you've got the kit you're going to build it. So this one goes on the shelf, and we move on to the next build project. I'm not sure what that's going to be just yet, but I'll be making a start on whatever it is in the next few days. So I'll bring you up to date as soon as that's on the bench. In the meantime, everybody, look after yourselves. Enjoy your modelling most of all, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.